In Daniel chapter 2, we see Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, having a dream. And Daniel 2, verse 1 to 6 says this: And in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians, and the astrologers, and the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dream. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldean to the king, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show thee the interpretation. Verse 5. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The thing is gone from me. If ye will not make known unto me the dream, with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. So Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, but he doesn't remember it. And he calls for his sorcerers, his magicians, and they cannot tell him the dream, much more to give him the interpretation. So Nebuchadnezzar gets angry, and he sends out a decree that all wise men should be killed. And you can see that in Daniel chapter 2, verse 6 to 13. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were a part of these wise men. And so Daniel was sought after by Arioch to be killed after the decree that the king made. But Daniel sought for time, and he went to God, he prayed, and the dream was revealed to him. Daniel chapter 2, verse 19 to 21. And it says, Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. Verse 21. And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. Remember that. This will come up again later. Daniel continues to give God glory for revealing the secret to him. He then goes to Arioch, and Arioch takes him to Nebuchadnezzar the king. Nebuchadnezzar inquires of him if he can actually reveal the dream. And Daniel answers in the affirmative that of course it isn't him that interprets it, but the God of heaven who is able to reveal secrets. And the dream was this: Daniel chapter 2, verse 31 to 33, and it reads, Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breasts and his arms of silver, his belly, his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron, and part of clay. We'll stop there for now. Now who or what does this head of gold represent? We don't have to look much further to get the answer. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 37 to 38, the answer is revealed. It says, Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. 38. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the heaven, have ye given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. So we learn immediately that King Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom is represented by this head of gold. Now we move on to the other metal, the chest and arms of silver. We read in Daniel 2, verse 39, And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. So after the reign of Babylon, there should come another kingdom that is inferior but will overthrow Babylon. Now what kingdom overthrew Babylon? In Daniel chapter 5, Belshazzar, king of Babylon at the time, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, was having a feast. But this wasn't just any feast, because Belshazzar sought for the golden vessels that were taken from Jerusalem so that they could drink in them. Daniel chapter 5, verse 3 to 4 reads, Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. Verse 4. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In that same hour, a hand appeared and wrote a disturbing message on the wall. The king couldn't understand it because it was in a different language, but he was nonetheless afraid. He began to shake and his countenance changed. He called for the wise men and the Chaldeans and the magicians, but they could not give the interpretation of the writing. So the queen said, "King, do not worry, because there is a man that can interpret this message." And so they called for Daniel. Daniel rebukes Belshazzar, telling him of his rebellious and his prideful ways towards God, and that God had sent him a message because of his rebellion. Daniel chapter 5 verses 25 to 28 reads, "And this is the writing that was written, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balance and art found wanting. Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians." Verse 30 to 31 adds, "In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. And Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old," meaning he was 62 years old. So just as God had predicted in Daniel 2 verse 39, that after Babylon there would arise another kingdom. And as we saw, that kingdom is Medo-Persia. The Medo-Persian Empire, as the name suggests, is a combination of two kingdoms, the Medes and the Persians. So if Babylon was the head of gold, and after Babylon another kingdom was to arise, that then means Medo-Persia would be the chest and arms of silver. The split kingdom being represented by the two arms located on the chest area. We go back to Daniel chapter 2, where it said, "And after thee," meaning the Babylonian kingdom, "shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee," which we previously identified as the Medo-Persian kingdom. Now it continues to say, "And another third kingdom of brass, which shall be a rule over all the earth." If we are following the pattern here, a kingdom has to defeat another, and as we go down, each kingdom represents a different metal. So, if Babylon was the head of gold, and Medo-Persia defeated Babylon to become the chest and arms of silver, then who defeated the Medes and the Persians to become the belly and thighs of brass? As ambitious and powerful as Medo-Persia was, with an approximate 219-year reign under their belt, their kingdom was eventually overthrown by the Empire of Greece in the Greco-Persian War 331 BCE, led by no other than the renowned Alexander the Great. Continuing, Daniel 2 verse 40 says this, "And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise." Alexander the Great ruled 12 years, from 336 BC to 323 BC, and then he died. Approximately 200 years after his death, however, the Grecian Empire fell to Rome during the Battle of Corinth, 146 BC. So, in this prophecy, the Roman Empire is represented by the legs of iron. Rome was not conquered from without, but was later divided from within. After Rome grew, it was no longer feasible to have one ruler from a central point. So, Emperor Diocletian attempted to divide the kingdom into two parts, the western part and the eastern part. The permanent separation, however, came 395 AD, after the death of Theodosius, the last emperor to rule both halves. We acknowledge that Rome represents the legs of iron, and that they were not conquered but divided into two parts. Is it a coincidence that we only have two legs? Very interesting. We already know what iron represents. It represents the Roman Empire. But what would potter's clay represent in this prophecy? To understand this, we'd have to go to Jeremiah 18, verse 1 to 6. It reads, "The word which came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I will cause thee to hear my words. Then I went down to the potter's house, and behold, he wrought a work on the wheels. And the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. So he made it again another vessel, as seemed good to the potter to make it. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, O house of Israel, cannot I do with you as this potter, saith the Lord? Behold, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are ye in mine hand, O house of Israel." So, potter's clay is a representation of Israel, or God's house, God's people, or God's church. Potter's clay is a representation of Christianity. In other words, this feet era of the image represents the mixing and mingling of Rome with Christianity. Did Rome truly mix and mingle with Christianity at any time? Yes, it did. Christians were a persecuted set of people by the Romans. But things changed when Emperor Constantine supposedly converted to Christianity because of a vision he received that caused him to conquer in the power of the cross in battle. He later made Christianity legal in 313 AD, so Christians, once persecuted, became a people of high regard. The Bishop of Rome, otherwise known as the Pope, was especially regarded because he was given great power and influence. And as the western side of Rome became weaker, the eastern side, otherwise known as the Byzantine Empire of Rome, became stronger over time. The western side eventually fell in 476 AD. We were already informed of this, as we see in Daniel chapter 2 verse 42, as it says, "And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken." The division of Rome didn't just stop at the Western and Eastern Empire. Due to external and internal pressures, Rome began to split further into smaller barbarian tribes that would make up modern Europe today. These divided kingdoms are represented by the toes of the feet of the image. Daniel chapter 2 verse 43 states, "And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay." There has been many attempts to unite Europe under peace perpetually, but all attempts have failed, with the war between Russia and Ukraine being a recent example. This signifies the impossibility of a complete union of the European countries, as it states in the Bible, "For as iron and clay does not mix, so shall they not cleave one to another." So, to sum it up in its entirety, this feet era of the statue represents Rome moving from a pagan state to what they would call a papal state, from paganism to Christianity and all that followed. So this feet era represents papal Rome. It is important to note that even though Rome claims to have converted to Christianity, many of their pagan practices found their way into the church. Hence, we have the Roman Catholic Church. We go back to Daniel chapter 2 verse 34, as we didn't necessarily finish the entire dream. It continues like this. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. 35. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. We don't have to guess what this stone represents, because verse 44 tells us exactly what this means. And in the days of these kings, meaning the kings represented by the toes, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that this stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So this stone represents the kingdom of God that he will set up on this earth. And if you haven't caught it before, this image is a timeline of history from Babylon to our present day. And God is saying through this vision that he will come and destroy all these kingdoms, and he will set up his kingdom that will not perish, as we have seen those kingdoms perish. We go back to Daniel chapter 2 verse 21 that I told you that we would come back to at the beginning of this video. And it says, and he changeth the times and the seasons, he removeth kings and setteth up kings, he giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. God is revealing to Nebuchadnezzar and all that would read that he is the God that is in control, and he set up kings and he takes them down for its appointed time, or whenever he sees fit, according to what they do with the power he has allowed them to gain. This means that though pagan, God expects these kings to respond to the light he has given them, for he is the one that allows them to have this power. But unfortunately, these kings or these kingdoms ultimately rejected God, and so God had to destroy or replace them. There are, however, a few exceptions, as we see with Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, but he eventually acknowledged the God of heaven and served him. Fun fact, Nebuchadnezzar is the one that wrote Daniel chapter 4. But we eventually saw what his grandson did, Belshazzar. Also, Darius and Cyrus of Medo-Persia started by fearing God, and God used them to free the people of Israel. But as the kingdom rulership changed over time, Medo-Persia turned away from God, and as such, God had to allow them to be destroyed. This is why we are told in Daniel chapter 2 verse 39 that an inferior kingdom was to follow Babylon, and the trend would follow. The same reason why the metals get less valuable as we come down to the feet. The value in metal represents the moral state of these kingdoms. But though they become morally devalued, they become stronger over time, because gold is more valuable than silver, bronze, and iron, but it is weaker than the rest. So while morally the value of these kingdoms are decreasing, the strength of the kingdoms are increasing in another sense. They have become more paganistic and more evil as time progresses. So let us recap. The head of gold represents Babylon. The chest and arms of silver represents Medo-Persia. The belly and thighs of brass represents Greece. The legs of iron represents Rome, who was not conquered from without but was later divided from within into two separate parts. The feet, part of iron and part potter's clay, represents the papal Roman era or the Christian Roman era, and the further division of Rome into various barbarian tribes which makes up modern Europe. And finally, we have the stone that is cut out without hands out of the mountain. This signifies the kingdom that God himself will set up on the earth that will destroy all these earthly kingdoms. That would be the end of this video. I really hope you found this information to be helpful and that you gain some understanding about this image that we see in Daniel chapter 2, if you didn't already understand. There is an extended prophecy to this, so please stay tuned if you are interested in that. We'll be going through that in another video at another time. Consider liking and subscribing if you have not already to stay tuned to more art, Bible, and prophecy videos. That is it for today. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. God bless.